Hey guys, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. And today we are talking about The Drowning Kind by Jennifer McMahon. This book, you guys, I finished it 10 minutes ago. And I was like, I need to get on and talk about it while it's still fresh because it was so good. Now, if you've been around my channel for a while, you might remember I talked about this book, The Invited by Jennifer McMahon, which I absolutely loved. And I don't know why, but at the time I didn't really go and look and see if she had any backlist books that I hadn't read. I just kind of moved on to whatever was next in the list. But then when I saw The Drowning Kind, I grabbed it as soon as I saw it. So I think it's safe to say at this point that Jennifer McMahon has moved from author I really enjoyed to, from here on out, an automatic buy. So The Invited took a look at the idea of what if instead of buying and moving into a haunted house, you actually built one from scratch. And I thought that was such an interesting idea. And I thought she executed the book amazingly. So now moving on to The Drowning Kind. Now, I'm going to share as much as I can and try to make it as clear as possible because there's a lot of things going on here. But basically, this book is about two sisters, Lexi and Jax, and they grew up visiting their grandmother every summer at their grandmother's estate called Sparrow Crest. And it was this big kind of gothic house, and in the backyard there was this natural spring which had been formed into a swimming pool with granite sort of around it and underneath it to make it like a swimming pool. But it was a natural spring. And we learn really early on, in fact in the prologue, we learn that when the girls were little, their aunt Rita drowned in the water. And everyone in town kind of thought it really odd that the mother, Rita's mother, and the girl's grandmother, didn't fill the pool in. She kept it open. She kept swimming in it. She kept letting her grandchildren swim in it. And everyone in town thought that was really strange, like if your daughter drowned in the pool, you think you'd want nothing to do with it from there on out. But that wasn't the case for her, and she kept it open. In the first chapter of the book, we learn that Lexi, she's the oldest sister, she was left Sparrow Crest, the house, the estate, when their grandmother died. She was left the house, she was left the savings account, she was left the car, like just everything. And Jax is kind of like, okay. Okay, I mean, I guess I get it. I've got a career and everything. She's a social worker, and Lexi doesn't really have anything, and she suffers a little bit with mental illness. So she's like, well, okay, I guess that makes sense that Lexi would be left everything and me absolutely nothing. But she can't help but feel a little bit resentful about it because Sparrow Crest was such an important place, not just to Lexi, but to Jax as well. So in the previous year leading up to when the book begins, we learn that Jax has kind of taken some space away from Lexi. She's decided she doesn't really want to see her much or go to Sparrow Crest. She just needs some space and time because Lexi just seemed to be getting more and more intense as the years went on. One night she gets a startling amount of phone calls from Lexi. Phone calls that she doesn't answer, even though she's sitting right there by the phone. She's like, no, I'm not answering these calls. And every time Lexi leaves a voicemail, it's more and more erratic, more terrifying. She's saying things that don't make sense, and it's really just unsettling Jax. And then the next morning she gets a call from their Aunt Diane to tell her that Lexi's dead. This is not a spoiler, it's right in the beginning, it's right in the blurb. Lexi's dead, she drowned in the pool, like their aunt did, Rita. So from there the book goes back and forth between two different timelines. We have the present with Jax going to Sparrow Crest to deal with her sister's affairs, get everything in order, get everything ready, get a funeral prepared. Her father comes to town for the first time in a long time. She hasn't seen him in many, many years. Again, he was someone that she was putting distance between for her own, well-being. As she spends time with him, she finds out that he's kept in contact with Lexi over all these years, and she begins to resent that as well. So not only did Lexi get left everything, but she also somehow managed to have a relationship with their very unstable alcoholic father. The other time period that we see is in the 1920s, and we get the history of the estate and the Springs in general. We learn that a lot of people believe that there's magic in the Springs. And back in the 20s, a hotel used to be there where the house now stood. And the Springs was there, and people would stay at the hotel, and they would bring their sick loved ones, and they'd bathe them in the springs or get them a cup of the water to drink, and they would magically be healed. People would come from all over to do that, or even just to whisper into the water their deepest, darkest wishes. And it's kind of like, that old saying, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. Because as the time goes on, in the 1920s and onward, the people who are making these wishes and using the water as a magical cure-all tonic are starting to notice that they're paying a price. The Springs gives, but it also equally takes. So say if somebody brought their daughter there to heal them of some childhood illness that was ailing them, well, maybe a year later their husband would die. Or, something similar. You ask for one thing, you get it, but then you lose something of equal, something also very important. So the people back then who owned the hotel start to get really nervous, and tragedy strikes. It's a tragedy that leaves the man who owns the hotel. It leads him to burning it down. And from there, we just see how the lives of families in two different time periods are affected by this body of water. And it got so creepy, you guys. Jennifer McMahon, she managed to do it with The Invited as well, and she does the same thing in this book, where she creates an atmosphere that is so absolutely dark and scary. So for most of the book, there's this feeling of dread. Something bad is happening just out of your eye line, it feels like, just out of sight. You don't know what it is, and she creates this just amazingly creepy atmosphere. Even though nothing outwardly terrifying is happening, you still feel it. You just know it deep down inside, you know it. And then once we finally get to the last, say, 50 pages, when everything really kicks off, and then down to those last 5 to 10 pages, and then the final page, the fear keeps building and building until it finally gets to that final page, and you're like, whew. And it's the kind of book where you finish it and you just kind of sit there for a few minutes and you let it all sink in, and you let it just wash over you. And it was so good. And so now, after reading this one, I go to the front and I see that she's got a huge backlist of books that I haven't read yet. I love that, when you find an author that you just love so much, and then you realize that it's your lucky day because you've got a bunch of catching up to do. And I definitely felt that way about Jennifer McMahon here today. She's, like I said, she's become an instant buy author for me, one of my favorites. I just feel like she's such a gifted storyteller. So if you like, spooky books, there's a element of haunting to at least these two books. One more outright, and then in this one, it's the haunting of the lake or the springs. So what I'll do now is I'll give a little spoilers for those of you who are watching who don't really intend to read the book, but you're kind of curious now as to what the heck's going on with those springs. So now's the time to click away if you don't want any spoilers. But if you do, here we go. we never really find out why the springs. Like, we never find out how the springs came to be and how it's, you know, healing and haunted, as it were. We don't get an explanation for that, which is fine. You don't need an explanation. It doesn't matter why. But just the reveals of how it affects is bone chilling. And throughout the book, we see like 6 or 7 characters drown in the pool. And it feels like the pool takes their spirits in and uses it to make itself stronger. So once you are granted a wish from the water, you are forever in debt to it. So their grandmother, the girl's grandmother, when she passed away, it was because she was sick of it. And she left the house. She packed a bag, she went to a hotel in Arizona, and she died there. Because she knew if she put enough distance between her and the house, it would make her ill and it would kill her. Because when she was a little baby, her mom brought her to the water and would drink it, because we'd get her to drink it because her heart was failing, her lungs were failing, she was dying. She was 100% going to die. And so her mother would bring her there and do this. And eventually, after the hotel that was originally there burns down, their grandmother's parents bought the land. Well, he didn't buy it. He went to the man who burnt it down. And he said, I want to buy it. My daughter needs it. And the man's like, listen, buddy, I'm not selling it to anybody. It's bad news there. He said, but we'll play around a poker. If you win, you can have it. The springs, the 20 acres of land, it's all yours. Knock yourself out. But if you lose, you leave here. You never think about it again. You never talk about it again. And you never come back here again. So the guy's like, fine, let's do it. And he wins. So he goes, and he's the one who built Sparrow Crest for his wife and daughter to go and live. And so later, it's her daughter Rita that drowns. And then her daughter's, so it's her daughter Rita that drowns. And then her other daughter's daughter Lexi that drowns. And then eventually, on the very last page, we learn that, because what happens is when somebody you love drowns, you see them. You can see them in the water. And if it's completely dark out, they can rise out of the water. And there's one point where Jax is talking to Lexi and she's like, is this real? Are you real? And Lexi says, can you see me? Can you talk to me? And Jax says, yeah. And then Lexi's like, then let that be enough. What does it matter if it's real? And anyway, towards the end, we find that Lexi was able to lure Jax into the water, because we learn that Lexi's last wish to the water was she missed her sister. Jax had been gone, like I said at the beginning. She'd been distancing herself for about a year. And so she wished to the water that Jax would come back and visit her and stay with her and spend time with her. So the way the water worked, that was Lexi was lured into the pool and drowned, and then Jax came back to take care of business. So again, be careful what you wish for. And then Jax, not knowing that at the time, she makes a wish to the water. She wishes that she could have Lexi back. And so on the final page, we learn that Jax has drowned as well. The water, as much as she tries to not let the water call her to it, and her father tries very hard to keep the water from calling her into it, the water eventually does win. And now they're both, Lexi and Jax, together again, together forever in the water. So there you go, you guys. That is The Drowning Kind by Jennifer McMahon. If you've read this, let me know in the comments down below what you've thought. If you haven't read it and you love a good family story that's got some really, really unsettling, spooky moments, definitely check it out. Also check out The Invited. That book was so good. I loved it so much. And I can't wait to read more of Jennifer's backlist. gonna have to start trying to find them. Anyway, you guys, I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.